For the past few weeks, we've taken a break to really get our heads around next steps, record new interviews, and pursue new information. So far, this podcast has covered mere snapshots of Betty Jones and Kathryn Krigler's beautiful lives and their untimely and tragic deaths in 1990 at the hands of an unknown murderer and rapist. Now, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the goal of this podcast for me really is twofold. First, to honor the remarkable lives of these two women and share stories of how they continue to leave a legacy in the memories of their friends and family. But secondly, we feel convicted using the medium of podcasting to really bring renewed awareness to these unsolved murders. In this episode, we turn the corner from the stories of the past to the investigation of the present. And over the next few episodes, we hope that we can make real movement towards discovering the truth and empowering this community to take steps towards bringing a killer to justice.
By a double homicide. Thanks for joining us. Ms. Kathryn Krigler and Ms. Betty Jones were brutally murdered inside Krigler's home on Labor Day 1990.
Were murdered on September 3rd, 1990. Their killer has never been found.
5 years ago, two women were murdered in Starkville, and their killer has never been caught.
In partnership with Swell Story Media, this is Knock Knock, the unsolved murders of Betty Jones and Kathryn Krigler. My name is Jason B. Jones.
August 21st, 2015. The Starkville Police Department is requesting the assistance of the Starkville community and surrounding area with a new lead developed in the 1990 Labor Day murder case. The Starkville Police Department recently submitted the suspect DNA profile from the Labor Day murders for new DNA testing. As a result of the new test, two possible family names were associated with suspect DNA profile. What this means is that the suspect DNA profile is in some way related to both family names, but what that specific relationship is not known. This is why the Starkville Police Department is asking for leads and tips from the members of our community. The family names that are related to the suspect DNA profile are Hicks and Devine, D-E-V-I-N-E, or another alternate spelling of the name D-I-V-I-N-E. For those of you not familiar with the 1990 Labor Day murder case, here is a brief synopsis of the case. It is named the Labor Day case because it happened on Labor Day in 1990 between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. at the Krigler residence, 307 Lee Street here in Starkville, which is now named Dr. Martin Luther King Drive and was located across the street from Sunflower Grocery Store at the time, but now is a bar and furniture business. The suspect entered the residence and killed Betty Jones and raped and assaulted Kathryn Krigler, who survived to call 911. Mrs. Krigler was transported to Oktibbeha County Hospital to be treated for her injuries, and a rape kit was performed, and the suspect DNA profile was developed from this rape kit. Not long afterwards, Mrs. Krigler succumbed to her injuries and died. Mrs. Krigler identified the suspect as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes and very tan complexion at the time of the crime. The suspect's age ranges between 16 and 28 years old. Previous DNA testing of the suspect DNA shows the suspect to be approximately 90% white European descent and possibly 10% American Indian, and with possibly some portion of Jewish descent. So, with possible family ties to the family names of Hicks and Devine, D-E-V-I-N-E, or Devine, D-I-V-I-N-E, and the crime synopsis, we would ask the public to ponder this information, and if you think of anything that might help this investigation based off the new lead, to call Sergeant Bill Lott of the Starkville Police Department at 662-323-4131 or 662-769-4415.
When we started this podcast journey, I knew I was way out of my league. Other than being an avid fan of true crime podcasts, I have zero experience in criminal justice or investigative journalism. All I have is a pile of unanswered questions and an itch to find some answers for my mom, my dad, my friend Juki, and everyone affected by the actions of this monster. One of my very first calls, way back in 2015, was to Sergeant Bill Lott of the Starkville Police Department. I had randomly set up a Google alert for the keywords Betty Jones, Labor Day murders, and Starkville, Mississippi. And out of the blue one day, I received a notification that there was a brand new press release from the Starkville Police Department. A few days later, I called Sergeant Lott, and he was gracious enough to take my call. And since then, he has been so helpful to me, my family, and the Krigler family, providing information on the work both he and the SPD are doing to help solve this crime. This episode will be a bit different from previous episodes, as we'll be focusing on the conversation I had with Sergeant Bill Lott back in May of this year.
I'm Sergeant Bill Lott with the Starkville Police Department. Started in law enforcement in 1984.
And how long have you been working on this case?
Since 2003. When I first started looking at the case, I was looking at a file. It was a piece of paper. I didn't know Betty or Kathryn Krigler. I didn't know that. I knew this happened. I knew that happened. I saw what had happened to her. And then I started finding out what kind of person she was. Finding out that she was a elder in her church, which is for a female in that day was rare and still rare to this day. And all these things. And you know, my aunt and my sister, you know, were two very influential people in my life, you know, and I have a high respect for women and the role they play in our society, and you know, it's just not fair, you know what I mean? What was done was not fair, it's not right, and I want to see it right, and I may not get that. That may be selfish of me, but I would like to see this solved because it's the fair and the right thing to do, you know, not, you know, because it just doesn't sit well with me what was done. Because Betty is a good person, you know? She was a good member of her church. She was a mother to the baseball team. I mean, it's just not right. It's just not fair. And it just stinks that life is not fair. It's not. And I want it to be fair. And I want it to be solved for her. And me too. Selfishly, me too. Because I like for my world to make a little sense, you know, and this just makes no sense. It just makes no sense. I'm always searching. I always will be. I'll be searching until the day I die. I won't stop.
Back in May, my friend and film director Jason Adams took a trip with me to Starkville, Mississippi, in an effort to really walk the streets where all this happened. As I've mentioned before, I had not been back to Starkville since Betty's funeral when I was 10 years old. Before we left, Jason and I knew that we wanted to meet with Sergeant Lott and hear directly from him about this case and possibly learn if there was anything that we could do to help. We scheduled a time to connect and met up at the police station. Sergeant Lott arrived in his police-issued SUV, and for the next couple hours, we drove around Starkville, talking about Betty and Kathryn, the investigation, and new developments in the case.
Fortunately, with this case, it boils down to this. In 1990, he came in the house, and he goes in there, and he after he kills Betty, and he rapes Kathryn Krigler.
Now, I've read there's a lot of conflicting stories as I've been trying to learn about it, because the only time I ever heard about it was from my parents, you know, as a 10-year-old.
Here's another thing you need to know about that.
Yeah.
Love conflicting stories. Let me tell you why.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes you have people that'll come in and confess to a murder, you already know what happened.
Right.
You know what the facts and circumstances are. Okay?
Right.
So if somebody comes in and says, you know, let's say I had a 10-inch butcher knife and I did this, and that was out there, you know, it's like kind of like urban legend.
Right.
He comes in and says that, you know it wasn't. So you know you got somebody that's false confessing.
Right.
But you always hold back key elements of the crime and things so that you know if you got somebody confessing, that they're confessing to the actual crime and they did it.
Now, why would people falsely confess to a crime?
Well, you know, why do people do anything they do? Some people want attention.
Mm-hmm.
Some, you know, there was a serial killer in Mississippi that ended up saying he killed, like 30-something people. Then he said he'd take them to the bodies, and when it came down to it, he didn't take them to nothing. He got the notoriety.
Right.
Notoriety, or wanting to be something, or be special, and if your mind is warped, being special to them, you know, that way doesn't bother.
So it's that glorification of like a Jesse James, somebody that's an outlaw.
It could be that, or it could be other different aspects of it. But the end thing is, also, like, listen, when you're interviewing somebody, as a criminal detective, again, because all the schools are gone, I never, when I'm talking with you, let's say you're a criminal suspect,
okay,
I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm not going to say you did this, this, and this. I'm going to say this. All right, I know what happened. Tell me what happened. And then I'm going to let you talk. And if you're not being truthful, I'm going to say, that's baloney. Start over. And then, because look, if you do it the reverse way, if you say, I know you did, yeah, and you keep pounding somebody, you could get a false confession, because he might say, you know, might be weak-minded, or say, well, forget it, he doesn't believe anything I'm saying, so I'm going to tell him what he wants to hear.
Right.
So he says, I did, yeah, just like you've been hollering at him. Oh, yeah, I got to commit. No, you didn't.
Right.
He just parroted back the information you gave him.
You seem like all of this stuff is really important to you. Is this something that you've always wanted to do? Have you always wanted to be a police officer? Because it seems like there's some police officers, they do a great job, they do their duty, but it seems like you really have a deeper passion than just a regular police officer.
Well, yes. Well, when I was in the first grade, we were having this is near the end of the school year, and we're going to have our school play. And there was a policeman in the play. And the teacher chose another kid, and I threw such a fit that she changed it and made me the policeman in the play.
And that's where it started, right?
Yeah, as far back as I remember, I've always wanted, you know, if you're not in this business to help people, I don't know why you need to be in it. I mean, I didn't become a police officer because the chase and all that, that's not what excites me. Fixing problems, solving. I had an aunt, school teacher like Kathryn Kriegler, that helped raise me, and so I can, you know, this case ties into, you know, elderly lady, school teacher Kathryn, you know, it just strikes a chord with me, and it struck a chord with me way back then, and I mean, I was fascinated with it, and my whole career, I mean, the reason I left Mississippi State University was because I couldn't get in investigations, and so you know, I came to Starkville and started over. I was a lieutenant out there.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I went to Starkville PD, I had to start over as an officer.
You took a demotion. Yeah.
Started over as an officer. And then became a detective, you know, after a few years. But
now, do you remember, so you were at Mississippi State when this happened?
Yes.
And Betty was extreme. I got a chance to go talk with Strat, with the baseball department. I mean, I was on the baseball field while they were practicing. It's been an amazing couple of days. And she is so loved there. Were you aware of her at all when you were at Mississippi State? Or
no, because at that time I was working full-time and going to school at night. So, no. But I did work all the baseball games.
So do you remember it happening?
Oh, yeah, I remember it happening, yeah. And the thing is, this case was, at first they had a hot suspect. Mm-hmm. Everybody's convinced, it's still convinced, but the DNA doesn't match, you know, and honestly, you know, people like, I had one person approach me, you know, saw me and said, he said, you know who did that killing? And I said, who, you talking about? I said, yeah. I said, well, his DNA doesn't match. He said, well, your DNA's wrong. What can you say to that? Okay, what did I tell you? Kathryn Kriegler was raped, right? She's 80-something years old, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
81.
All right, when did DNA come online?
I'm
I'll
not
tell
sure.
you, 1995. How many states were involved in it? 7. Okay, Mississippi was nowhere on the horizon. Okay, here's what we have. In 2003, I took the rape kit. I had to go to Dr. Scales' lab down in Brandon. Here's the reason the case is good, because when he did go in there and he raped her, you know, she was able to call 911. She was still alive. She went to the hospital. Medical personnel performed a sexual assault kit on her. Okay, that sexual assault kit was maintained. Okay, now that has nothing to do with the police. That was not taken by the police. That was not part of the crime scene. That was taken from her person, and the DNA. Here's the crucial part: is semen-based DNA profile.
So not just hair follicles. This is actual semen that was...
Semen.
Wow, okay.
This is actual semen DNA profile. Now, it's not hair, it's not sweat, it's not blood, it's a person's semen.
Which is pretty pure, right? Like, that's probably the purest form of DNA, right?
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Would anybody have had the presence of mind to plant semen in a crime scene back in 1990?
No.
No, because it wouldn't be any reason to, because DNA wasn't even on the radar.
Right.
So you know this is your guy because you have a semen-based DNA profile taken by medical personnel, not by anybody else, but medical personnel trained to do sexual assault of kids. Okay, the profile was developed. Okay, what the profile basically is 16 sets of 2 numbers. It'll be like 16, like you 1, 2, all the way down to 16. Then it'll be like a 29, 28. 27, 26, or it can be 23, 20 something else. But you see what I'm saying? It's just a series of numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Now, when it goes into the national database, CODIS, the way it was set up, it had to be real strict. It only looks for the exact match that has the same sets of 2 numbers for 16. Okay? 16 sets the exact match. It has to be that. Or CODIS will not spit you out, this is your guy. It has to be a perfect match.
Because of privacy laws?
No, because that's going to be your guy. But when it was being argued to do it in the first, they wanted to make it as strict and narrow a path as it could be for no confusion.
So there wouldn't be witch hunts, right? So it wouldn't be like it's close and then you pick that guy because...
But see, okay, here's the thing. When you pass a law, no matter how good... or there's unintended consequences of it, right?
Right.
Good or bad. Could be good, could be bad. Okay, with DNA, they said, okay, well, we know if we only search for exact matches, that's going to be our guy. Then all you got to do, like, let's say a guy hits out there. He's in Peoria, Illinois, in jail. It doesn't say, oh, we're going up there to arrest him. Then what we do, we get a search warrant, we go up to Peoria, Illinois, and the guy who matches that, we take another swab from his mouth and test him again. And if he matches then we charge him.
And do you have to work with Peoria, Illinois' local law enforcement in order to, like, collaborate on that?
Yes. Well, a lot of times what you want to do is you'll want to get your DNA search warrant local. You know, from either a justice court judge or one of their circuit court judges, depending on how they're set up. But to that degree, yes. But I mean, you know, the thing is everybody that's in prison and doing a stint for any violent crimes or whatever is in CODIS.
Right. So that's the only way you get into CODIS is if you've already been arrested for something. So
been doing time for it.
Okay, so if you're arrested on a misdemeanor or anything like that, they're not taking DNA. You have to actually
let me explain that to you, though, too. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that you can, just on arrest doesn't mean you're guilty or anything. Convictions when you go to prison,
right?
But even the Supreme Court has ruled if you arrest on a misdemeanor, you can take DNA.
Okay.
The federal government does it on felonies and misdemeanors already. We don't because it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Because you storing it all, every time we arrest somebody, we take DNA. You don't have to develop. You can store it, but still you got to store it.
Right.
So
tell me, like, maybe I just don't know enough about DNA, but it sounds like there are shared elements in a DNA strand. Like my mom always used to say when I was growing up, said, you better be nice to your brother because he's the closest family member you've got. He's even closer to you than I am because you guys came from the same the same DNA.
You got half of your mom and half of your dad. That's
right.
As close as you get.
Right, and so
because you only share her profile. You don't share your dad's profile with her.
Yeah, so my brother and I would be the closest DNA strand. Like if you looked at both of ours, I don't know much, but they would be really close. So why can't we do things? You know, let's say this person had a criminal in their family. Why can't we check those things against his DNA?
It's interesting you're asking me that because that's why I'm here talking to you today.
What I learned is that Sergeant Lott is no ordinary police officer. In fact, I discovered that in his spare time, he's constantly taking classes and learning more about emerging DNA tools, all in an effort to look deeper into this case. The study of forensic science is continuing to reveal new connections and leads that take the investigation even further. Ignorantly, I always assumed that Betty and Kathryn's case was cold and dormant. What I was discovering was, just under the surface, the police department was continuing to pursue new ways to find resolution for this tragedy. In fact, during the past couple of years, I learned that the DNA sample had been run again and identified both family name connections and ethnicity information within the strand.
Daily Journal, August 21st, 2015. Starkville police ask for help with 1990 murder case. Starkville. New evidence has heated up a 25-year-old cold case in Starkville. The Starkville Police Department recently resubmitted DNA from a 1990 murder-rape case. The new testing developed a profile that shows the suspect could be related to the Hicks and Devine families. The case happened on Labor Day, 1990, at a house on Highway 182, across the street from the Sunflower Grocery Store, which is now Speller Furniture and Rick's Cafe. Between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., a male entered 307 Lee Street and killed Betty Jones. He then raped and assaulted Kathryn Krigler. She survived to call 911. She was transported to the Actibia County Hospital, where rape evidence was gathered. Krigler later died from her injuries. Krigler told the police that the attacker was a very tan white male with blonde hair and blue eyes, somewhere between 16 and 28 years old. Previous DNA testing shows the suspect to be approximately 90% white European descent, possibly 10% American Indian, and possibly some portion of Jewish descent. Anyone with information on those families or the 1990 Labor Day murders is asked to call Sergeant Bill Lott at 662-323-4131.
Let's take a quick break. While living in Ethiopia, some friends of mine witnessed firsthand the consequences of extreme poverty. They saw how Ethiopian women, in an effort to provide for themselves and their families, were forced to make unthinkable choices just to survive. These friends realized they wanted to give these women another choice, one that would provide them the opportunity to earn a living. It was from this experience that Fashionable was born. This movement started with a collection of hand-woven scarves, of which my wife has many, and has grown to include handmade leather bags and jewelry, apparel, shoes, and most recently, a premium denim line, lovingly crafted by women who have overcome extraordinary circumstances. We're so honored to partner with Fashionable and offer our listeners 15% off their first order. Go to livefashionable.com and use the discount code KNOCK15 at checkout. Again, visit livefashionable.com today to help bring opportunity and choice to these amazing women. As we continued our drive, my head was spinning from all this new information. The things I was hearing, honestly, blew me away. How is it that we could have untampered DNA evidence, yet no matches had been made? If we couldn't find a match, honestly, could this case ever be solved? How many other rapes and murders did this guy get away with? As I sat in the front seat with Jason Adams in the back, I felt like I was getting a crash course in DNA research, and I was just doing my best to keep up.
Okay, 11 states right now are doing familial search DNA. Okay, let me give you, for instance, of that familial search. Familial search is where, instead of going in a database, but of course this is done at the state level. You can't do it on the federal level. The federal database is controlled, by the federal government, and Douglas Hare's is over NDIS, which is the federal database. And they're not doing it at that level, but see, each state has jurisdiction over its own database.
Okay, so even though there's CODIS, you have jurisdiction just over.
There's Mississippi CODIS, and then there's a National Database Index.
Okay.
NDIS. CODIS. All right. In the state of Mississippi, whenever DNA came online, each state put a law in effect, and they pretty much set up all the same. Mississippi has its own database, and by law, it says the Mississippi Crime Lab will manage that database, and they will have a custodian. All right, and that's what they even call Douglas Hare, who's Dr. Douglas Hare of the FBI. He's the custodian of the national database.
Okay.
But over the state of Mississippi, Mississippi owns that database. So I actually went to the Mississippi Crime Lab and approached them, and I said, hey, look, I want to get familial search DNA done because 11 states are already doing it. Let me give you an example of how that works. California's doing it, okay? And they found the Grim Sleeper killer. This is a guy that was attributed to 70 murders since the 1970s or 80s, okay? They never found a match for his DNA. They found multiple occasions where all these different scenes that all of it matches together, that this is your guy, this is one guy. They were hitting on that with each other, but it was not identifying a suspect. So California decided to query their own Attorney General's office and say, hey, instead of getting a law passed, they said, hey, maybe we should approach it from getting an Attorney General's opinion. And the Attorney General could if he gives you a favorable opinion and says, hey, under the current law, because see, the way the Mississippi law and the California law is, it says DNA is a tool for investigative purposes for law enforcement. Not for the crime lab,
of course, right.
Not for anybody else, but for us. And they made it, But California says, okay, it's broad enough, it covers familial search. It's a tool, it's trying to help identify a suspect. I'm breaking it down simply.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit more wordy, and you get lawyers involved, it's a little more wordy. But
always,
basically, I'm just breaking it down to its elements. It's a little more technical than that. But so the Attorney General in California says, yeah, under your law, under the original law, you don't need to have a state law passed. You can do it because of the way that the law was worded, that it's a tool for law enforcement and that it's to identify suspects. And that's what they wanted to do with it. So California starts doing it. Okay? Well, they do familial search DNA in California. And up pops the son of the Grim Sleeper killer.
So all of this is already there. Mm-hmm. It's just a search algorithm that's saying either search for direct, but literally they just have to flip a switch that pumps out.
It's a software program. It's just a simple software program rewritten to include people who have half or whatever kinship you want to look for DNA. Because so it actually identified the son of the Grim Sleeper killer, and they tracked right back to him. Okay?
Oh my gosh.
And he was actually a mechanic for one of the precincts right in California, law enforcement precincts right there. Was not in the national database.
So the lead,
not in the state database.
The lead was right under their nose the whole time, but they couldn't.
There was nothing ever to tie him to the crimes.
Yeah.
I mean, he lived a clean life. He went and attacked at-risk people, prostitutes, people that might not anybody notice they were missing till 6 months or a year, or being out of contact for a month was not something they would call the police and file a police report on.
In your opinion, do you think that this guy that killed Betty and ultimately killed Kathryn, do you believe that he was a first offender, or do you just believe that he's just never been caught?
Well, the thing is you're going to find it funny. I don't like to theorize. I do not like to wait. To me, it's a waste of time. I'm a kind of guy is, what are the facts? All right, here's my victim. I'm going to go interview them. All right, who's this person? Let me go interview this. I want to rule everything out that's tangible. Okay, I don't waste time thinking about this, and then. Now, do I think logically and do that? Like, are my wheels turning on anything that develops? Yes, but all toward pushing the case forward, not trying to push the theory forward on how it happened or who it could be.
That way you can stay objective.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me go a little further. This is there's a good chance that Betty and Kathryn's killer could be dead. And you say, well, that's bad. No, not necessarily. Because the Righteous brothers, cold case, one of the Righteous brothers' ex-wives was murdered and raped and murdered in California. Okay, so they do a familiar search. They find the nephew of the killer, track back to the actual killer. Now, the killer's been dead 40 years.
Right.
So his DNA never hit the database and wasn't going to hit it unless there were some unsolved murders where they found, something maybe. But he was actually killed the day of or day after he killed that lady. So you can actually, whether he's dead or alive, we can get to him now.
Yeah, so because DNA wasn't in effect until you said 1995, is that right? This could have been his very last crime over the course of 10 years, but no one was taking or logging or coding DNA because it happened before 1995.
Or it could be this. Again, this is why I don't like to theorize. He could have been in the military, went overseas, and got killed in military action, and we never, he would never pop up, come back and offend. Or it could have been the next house he went into, he got shot and killed because he was coming in the house.
But if he was shot and killed in the house, again, and I don't want to theorize because it's also unproductive for me too, but so in 1990, the only way that any DNA would have been taken at all would have been in a rape situation. Is that right?
No, they were actually taking it for blood. Back then, all they did was blood typing.
Wow.
There was no DNA there wasn't any, they did not take this for DNA. They took it for blood typing and all that, because that's the way they used to match up. Before DNA, you did blood typing. Okay, is this blood type match? Okay.
Right.
So we flash forward to me. I go, just a little over a month ago, I asked for an attorney general's opinion from our attorney general's office to where I could start doing familial search testing. And I've got an opinion that the opinion was basically, we're not saying you can and we're not saying you can't. They put it back in the crime lab's lab. But see, the crime lab, here's the thing about the crime lab. Everybody watches CSI and all those shows and thinks they do all these tests. But here's the way here's the way in the real world works. Okay, we have a case where a felony case where we send evidence to be tested at the crime lab. We send it there and we don't say anything. You know what happens to that? Nothing. We have to specify exactly what tests is to be done. They will do no more or no less than that test we tell them to do. They won't say, oh, because we did this test, we're going to go ahead and do this test. No, they'll contact you and say, okay, this test did this, but if you want to, we could test for this. Waiting for you to say. And let me take it a little bit further. Okay, DNA. All right, let's say you're doing some DNA testing, and it's going to consume the sample. That means if they test it, there'll be no sample left.
Oh, right.
For defense.
Right.
They have to. They can't do it. They have to contact the detective and say, "Okay, this is going to consume the sample. Do you authorize testing?" They have no authority in DNA testing at all. So it doesn't need to be in their lab because they do not make those decisions. It's not an investigative tool for the crime lab. It's an investigative tool for the police, and it says so in the law.
So what would it ultimately take for you to be authorized to do familial DNA search?
This is what we're doing now. I've contacted the director of victims assistance for the attorney general's office. Same people, so they're going to help me. They're going to actually have one of their prosecutors help me write a law or help write a law for us to where we can get DNA testing done. And I'm going to have them specify in that law that our case be the test case.
Are you serious? Guys, I was totally blown away. This was the moment when I knew in my heart that this case could finally be solved. Not only was there the possibility of using familial search, widening the results to include family members, thus resulting in new leads, but Betty and Kathryn's case could be just the beginning of many more cases being solved. How many other families believe their loved ones will never find justice? How many criminals are out there continuing to destroy lives? If this tool is available, why wouldn't we use it to help provide peace and justice? Unfortunately, like many good things, the road can be long and complicated. Let's take another quick break. If there's one thing I've learned about Betty through this process, is that her life was dedicated to giving back. I know she would have loved organizations like Thistle Farms. At first glance, Thistle Farms is a world-class provider of natural home and body products. In the summertime, their bug spray is a must. But what is truly amazing about these items are the people who make them. All of Thistle Farms products are lovingly crafted by women, survivors of trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. You see, beneath the surface, what Thistle Farms really is a place that provides safe housing, economic independence, and a strong community of advocates for these women. Take a minute to visit thistlefarms.org and learn more about this amazing organization. And while you're there, use the discount code KNOCK15 for 15% off your first order. That's thistlefarms.org, where love is the most powerful force for change in the world. Before having this conversation, like you maybe, I falsely believed that DNA was the silver bullet. If you had that, the case was solved. But there's a difference between knowing what the next steps are and being able to legally take them. We got back to talking about Betty and Kathryn and why this case in particular means so much to him.
Did you know Betty was an elder in her church back in the day?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's been one in her church since, female elder.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was one. She was an elder. And that's the same as being a deacon in a Baptist church. Yeah.
I mean, she was well thought of. And, you had Will Clark and Raphael Paramera and all those guys, that...
I'm about to talk to them. Yeah.
And, she was a mother. All the different athletic programs, so the kids don't get homesick, have like 10 mothers basically who, cook them home-cooked meals or, things like that. I mean, give them chewing gum, things, just simple stuff. And, check on them so they don't get homesick and go home. Because, sometimes back in the day, you don't have all this mass media communication you have now where you FaceTime somebody and all that. Back then, you get homesick and want to see somebody from home, you had to get in the car and drive home. And sometimes they wouldn't come back. So that process built out of building those bridges to where they would feel comfortable here and would reduce the homesickness where they wouldn't want to go home, and it was a good thing. And she was passionate about the baseball team. She's an amazing lady. But
so she was kind of like a mom to some of those.
A lot of them, yeah, and very active. And we go to the ball games, and like I told you, I had an aunt that raised me, and it was elderly, and so I kind of related to Kathryn. Being a school teacher, my aunt being a school teacher, I tie into that, and But the good thing about me is I'm hard-headed. I won't quit. I just don't quit. I'm going to honestly tell you, everything has been done that can be done. All the original suspects, DNA has been ruled out. Everybody and his brother. I mean, I've interviewed so many different people. Chased them.
How many interviews do you think you've conducted? Ballpark?
I don't know. Well over 100. The thing is for me, this case, ironically, at this point in time, is down to what's going to solve it, and what's the kingpin piece of evidence is that sexual assault kit. Why is it so good? One, because it wasn't performed by the police. All those stories you're talking about this being done, that it doesn't matter. The rape kit, you can't plant semen in 1990 because you don't even know to do it. You know?
Do you believe this case will be solved?
I do. I think, I think familial search will do it because, odds are, and again, I don't like to theorize, but I think the guy's dead because you can't do what this guy did and not do it again. I just don't believe it. I mean, it was so evil. I mean, just raw evil, what he did. And like I said, I don't want to talk about what he did, but if we go offline, I'll tell you.
In generalities, is this one of the most violent heinous crimes you've seen in your career?
Yes.
Like in a small town.
If we're offline, I'll tell you it.
I don't want to hear detailed just yet. Overview, is this kind of case rare for Starks? This level of brutality.
It's rare anywhere. It's rare anywhere. You don't get much worse than this. And when we go offline and I tell you, you'll understand.
Yeah, and the only story I've ever heard.
You sure you really want to hear?
I do.
Because you sure?
I do.
Listen, dude, this is as bad as it gets.
Yeah, I do.
You sure?
I'm sure. And
your hand to God, sure.
Hand to God, I'm sure. And this is the reason why. Is I think for me, this was folklore. This was a taboo story that I grew up with that honestly embarrassed me. I was telling him the other day, we would have grandparents' days at school, and they would say, "Oh, where's your grandparent?" And I would have to say, "Oh, well, she died." Oh, I'm sorry. How did she die? She was murdered. And immediately,
people get that icky feeling, or they get weird with you.
And for me, I know, and I'm scared. I'm scared to hear your story, but I feel like I need to, for me to be able to know.
It's going to make you angry. It's not going to make you feel better. It's going to make you more angry. It's not going to give you closure.
Yeah, I
just want you to know, I got to forewarn you. I don't know any other way to tell you than to forewarn you. That it's not going to give you closure. It's not going to make you feel better about it. It's going to make you feel worse. It will make you feel worse.
He was right. I wasn't ready. You can ask my wife. I had nightmares for 3 days straight after hearing the truth. I'm not interested in ever sharing the details of what happened that night because it doesn't need to be told. In fact, I've done everything I can do to forget. Many people have asked me why I'm making this podcast. And if you want to know the truth, I'm making this podcast because, like Sergeant Lott predicted, I'm forever angry. What happened to Betty and Kathryn is not okay, and it cannot be dismissed or forgotten. And if there is anything I can do to help justice be served, then all of the time, money, and sleepless nights are worth it.
This case haunts me because we've made a lot of strides, but there's so much misinformation about it. That this guy was it, and that they're just not bringing it forward for whatever reasons, and that's frustrating. You can't
So why
huge.
Why do you feel haunted by it?
Because of the evilness of it, and because it has fought me every step of the way. Nothing has come easy in this case. Nothing has come easy. Every time you think I'm this close, but I'm this far, because I've got a DNA sample, 90% European, 10% American Indian.
Right.
That he has, what did Kathryn Kriegler say he had? Blonde hair, blue eyes? He had blonde hair, blue eyes. Said he would be between 5'6" and 6 foot, 150 to 190 pounds, barring illness or injury. Because, you know, if you have an injury when you're a child or you have some other illness, it can stunt your growth. So it projected that. Now there's another company that's wanting to do facial recognition software or develop it off of the genetics. But to me, it's not there yet.
Sure.
Because if you look at the pictures they have, yes, they look like the person. They look a lot like them, but still it doesn't get you there.
Yeah.
You can't say that is the guy.
Right.
My
Why
job
are people
to.
so sure that they have a suspect?
Well, because the guy was a good suspect. He was a great suspect. Let me assure you this much. Okay, let's say they'd have gone and arrested him on that good circumstantial case, and they had gotten a jury to convict him. They would have convicted him of capital murder. And do you realize he would have been put to death before I got my DNA developed?
Wow.
That's terrifying.
Or if he stayed on death row, he would get cleared by, if for some reason he got a pardon or a stay, DNA would clear him, and then he would have a lawsuit against the city for...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
His DNA doesn't match. What are you going to do? You can't. He doesn't match a semen-based... Say, oh, the evidence stayed. Oh, well, you know what? It wasn't his semen in 1990. What do you say to that?
It sounds like what you're saying is like...
The struggle of the case itself.
Well, it sounds like it's better to go slow and be absolutely certain.
Methodical, yes. Yeah, sure. And you just, that's the way you do. I mean, you know, look, I don't buy into anything, I don't buy against it. You know what I'm saying? Like I told you, when you interview, I have a responsibility here, okay? My responsibility is to protect the citizens of this city, to investigate crime, identify the people who did it. Now, it's the prosecutor's job to get them prosecuted.
Right.
My job is to get them identified and do a good investigation, not prosecuting people. So if I do my job, then it's the turn for the prosecutor, and then the judge does his job, and that's the way it works. And I'm cool with that. But, you know, like I said, it's haunting me because, you know, the misnomers in the community. I've done so many stories, you know, sharing this information, what we're trying to do, and there's still, you know, some people that believe, you know, that guy did the crime. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, the DNA doesn't match. And
to your point, it was really good DNA.
Yeah,
So,
and the other thing is the DNA says, you know, the guy's going to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And remember,
And is
is
X blonde hair and blue eyed?
Yes.
Okay. That really says it all. The DNA doesn't match. All of the people who believe that it's one of the usual suspects, sadly, are wrong. And trust me, I wish they were right, and that door could be closed once and for all. But if the DNA doesn't match, what's next? I want to thank Sergeant Bill Lott for his continued work on this case. I am so proud of the tireless efforts that he and the whole SPD continue to put in for both of our families. Now, the question we're left with is, what can our community, all of you who are listening and care about Betty and Kathryn, what can we do to make familial search a reality in Mississippi? Next time on Knock Knock.
Hi, I'm Rockney Harmon. Was a prosecutor in Alameda County, California for 33 years. I've been retired for 10 years, but I've still been working on trying to convince states to do familial searching, like 11 states so far have done. So when OJ was charged, I was asked to help. It was this kind of open-ended thing, but I spent most of a year down in L.A., preparing for the trial and during the trial. And, this process, if we try to compare it with CODIS, the national database, this seems to be as efficient as CODIS is in solving cases.
You can't find your way through the black, so you pray for light.
Knock Knock is produced by Chris Cerrone and me. Special thanks to the Knock Knock team: Lacey Orsioli, Rebecca Jones, Jason Adams, Simon Jones, Cole Flynn, Colleen Jones, and Maggie Thomas. To join the Knock Knock community, be sure and connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Knock Knock Pod. There you can ask questions, leave comments, or just say hi. We've also set up a voicemail at 1-888-57-BETTY. If you have any comments or questions, or you'd like to be a part of the show, please call and leave a message. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you download podcasts. Reviews are key to keeping Knock Knock on the charts where people can find our show. Our outro music was provided by my friend and one of my favorite artists, Matthew Perriman Jones. To listen to more of his music, please visit mpjmusic.com. We'll be back soon with our next full episode, and we'll post a quick Q&A episode between now and then. So make sure and get your questions and comments in soon. Thanks again for subscribing to the Knock Knock Podcast.
As the sun